Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Nationals podcast. It is Wednesday, March 9th, 2022. And joining us today, it is Matt Weyrich from NBC Sports Washington. We've got Lockout to talk about. And bigger thing here, though, Nash specific. Is the lockout better or worse for the Nats? Very complex question. We'll have answers for that and more. But first, as always, our intro video.
Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, once again, Josh Neighbors here, host of the Locked On Nationals podcast. Joining us, it is Matt Weyrich from NBC Sports Washington. So, Matt, we're like, the last couple of years have been really difficult as sports coverage, sports media people, because we're so used to our schedules of, okay, football ends, gives way to the heat of college basketball season. College basketball tapers off, which leads us into baseball's beginning / NBA playoffs. And now we have gotten the carnage of no MLB season, which has become negotiations for MLB and MLBPA, also the conference tournaments, plus a bunch of NFL trades that have been sparked by some weird free agency. I can't think of a time that was this crazy in the NFL, before pre-draft, right? This is where we get sick of all the draft coverage. We've got so much movement that we don't have to think about the draft for a little while now. And it's just kind of it's all been nuts for people like us. But still, for the people who love baseball, it's like, all right, through all this, we just need baseball to come back. Like, we got to get the good news. And I think we're like, all right, there's movement in all these other places. Why can't baseball have the movement? Baseball, give us the movement. And we're not getting the movement.
Yeah, it's we've gotten used to these long dry spells of inactivity for sure. I think those off seasons where Bryce Harper was a free agent, Manny Machado, and we waited until March for them to sign. It's kind of prepared us for this lockout when we've had to just sit here and go through basically 100 days of inactivity, which I don't know about you has driven me crazy. Just knowing that these rosters are stuck where they are, and that we're going to see a crazy frenzy of free agent signings, something that I kind of wish would happen more in general. That frenzy we saw right before the lockout, that's something that baseball has been trying to make happen for years, and it finally happened only because there was a labor dispute. So the movement, as you mentioned, has not been there, but we will see spring training like no other if they are able to come to a deal quickly and get this work stoppage out of the way.
Well, what's interesting is, I've been thinking so much about the NBA as this has happened, because the NBA has a great free agency period, like you just mentioned, right? And we're going to get this great free agency because of a lockout. But also, what the NBA has is that there is a revenue split, right? There is revenue sharing, and so I have a lot of us have been talking about baseball, and look, you can be an avid baseball fan, a diehard baseball fan, much like I am. And it's okay if you don't understand what's happening. Like, this stuff is not easy to understand, right? The financial disputes. But the one thing I don't think people understand, I've been hammering this a lot, is that revenues and there's no revenue sharing for players and owners here in Major League Baseball. That is why we're talking about stuff like salary caps and arbitration pools, because players have to ballpark how much the owners are going to make in future seasons. And the owners are like, we don't want you taking that much. We don't want you taking this much. And that's where the haggling becomes. This would all be simplified if this stuff was tied to revenues, would it not be?
It would definitely be simplified, but that's exactly what the union has been fighting against for a long time. Major League Baseball Player Association is the strongest union in North American sports, mostly because of their ability to avoid a salary cap being put into place. They don't want their salaries to be tied to revenues. They see that as a cap in and of itself, that there's going to be a certain amount that the league makes in a given year, and that will be the max amount that the players can make. Well, they see if our agents are able to negotiate higher salaries for us in a given offseason, we would surpass what maybe a given salary cap would be. And that's how they want that structure to be. So it is kind of the union's fault that it is like that, but it's something that they're willing to take.
So a counter to this, majority of players are making the minimum, right? That's where we're at. I mean, this is a majority of guys on rosters are making that minimum amount. And when you see things like the MLB deal with Apple TV, when you see stuff like potentially adding the patch on the jerseys, this is stuff that if you had revenue sharing, you would naturally get a cut of playoffs expansion, right? So while you might not be a huge fan of it, if you are the players expanding that, you naturally get a cut of this. It's a bit of cutting your nose off to spite your face. And so that's what's put this group of not saying it's this group's fault. That's what's put this group of players in this position. And that's why it should be like, in my opinion, now they should fight for revenue ties because there have never been more ways to make revenue off a sport. Cryptocurrency sponsors, gambling sponsors, new streaming partners, jerseys on patches. These are just 4 ways that they can make so much cash. Now is the time to get a piece of that, in my opinion. I'm not sure if you feel the same way. I understand they want their big guys to make the big cash, but when you see that, I was talking to Lindsey Crosby, he's locked on prospects. A majority of guys are making minimums, and that's how the owners want it. That's what's going to happen. That's why you need to tie yourself to the revenues so you get a piece of what's coming in.
Yeah, the players are really just attacking it from other angles. That's why the luxury tax threshold is such a contentious issue
Right.
between the two sides. That's why they have been fighting for a massive increase in minimum salaries. If the reported numbers hold, even at MLB's offer of 700,000 per year, which they're still seeking more than that, from what it was last year was about I think 550,000 to 700 now. That would be the largest single season increase in minimum salary in MLB history. So they're already on groundbreaking territory here for getting these young players paid. Not to mention the pre-arbitration pool, I should say, that you alluded to before, where players who finish, among the top of their peers will get paid additional amounts from that pool to reflect the contributions that they made for their team, as opposed to the guys like Juan Soto, who are MVP candidates making minimum salaries and not getting paid, a lick for it. So they are fighting for other ways to make that money, to get a bigger slice of that pie. And I think that's the big reason that we're in a lockout right now is not because of one particular issue. It's because the two sides are far apart on so many different issues. And as you mentioned, if they were to tie their earnings to revenue, it certainly would make things a lot simpler, but that is just a straw that the players union is not willing to break. They are going to hold firm on never allowing a salary cap for as long as they can, and we're going to have all of these weird, quirky rules for basically it's the owners trying to make money in other ways, and until they are willing to concede that, which I don't see happening.
Right, and that way it kind of circumvents their CBA. Is that like we're finding new like this Apple TV deal? I mean, I'm not sure if the players knew that was coming in, right? But I mean, we all saw this. What the number is $115 million, I believe it
Mm-hmm.
is, for 2 games a week on Friday nights. I think it's Friday night doubleheader,
And exclusive broadcasts.
exclusive broadcast, taking it off of RSNs, which I thought this was a great deal. I think it's a great deal for Major League Baseball. I think it's an actually good deal for baseball in general. I don't think the timing was good. I think when you're in a fist fight over cash, I think be like, by the way, we've added another 9-figure revenue stream, but we can't seem to find a way to play the games. It's bad for, and like, to me, I thought of this today, and I should have thought of this earlier, but I was so busy working today with conference tournaments, and I worked multiple shows, Sirius XM on the college side, that I really couldn't keep up with labor stuff. Well, that's the life of most baseball fans, right? Parents are dentists. My dad loves the Nats. He's a dentist. His 9 to 5, he can't keep up with that kind of stuff, but he comes home and sees Apple TV has struck a deal with Major League Baseball for 115 million. He's like, yeah, but what games? They're not
Mm-hmm.
playing games. I'm upset. I'm angry that they're doing this right now, and this is a disconnect. There's this weird disconnect right now, and that's the thing that I think a lot of fans are grappling with, and that's what could turn off a lot of fans, and we can't blame them. There are a lot of things right now fighting for your attention. So if you wanted to say, I love college basketball right now. I love the way the NFL has got the combine going and trades are happening and there's pro days happening. And so I want to follow my players and my baseball team's not playing. There's a whole lot of things fighting for your attention. It's a good deal, but what do you think about the timing of it? To me, it felt like it was off. I would have waited until we knew we had a deal. You could have waited till then, in my opinion, to announce that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely bad timing, and the optics of it coming out like it did. I mean, was reported. They didn't announce the
Right.
deal.
Yeah, it's true.
It was
Yeah.
reported, and the figures have not come out yet, which I imagine is because MLB is trying to be tight-lipped on that and not have the exact dollar amounts come out, because that would make it look even worse. So, the optics of it coming out right now certainly aren't good. I'm sure from a business perspective, it is better to just get the deal done and shake hands, be done with it, have it all in writing. That way, Apple can't back out. If the lockout were to extend a month into the year and they decide to get cold feet, that might be some money that MLB would lose out on. So I would imagine, from a business perspective, ignoring PR, it was the best decision to get it done as soon as possible. But yeah, I agree. The optics of it certainly weren't good, and I just want to say that baseball is a sport that is rooted in local markets. It is about
They
your
make their
local
money.
team.
They make their money,
Exactly,
right?
right? And to take, I know I work for an RSN, not one that broadcasts baseball games, but I work for an RSN, so I have to put a disclaimer out there. But I do think in baseball, in particular, compared to any other sport, it is really important to invest in local markets. And taking games off of your regional network and making them harder to access for local fans is only going to drive them away. You're only really going to get the diehards tuning in on Apple TV, where you have to subscribe. I mean, I'm not an Apple TV subscriber, and I'm probably going to have to get it now because I'll want to watch these games. You won't even be able to get them on MLB TV. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So, and the blackouts. That's all. That's what I'll end with.
Well, I'm with you, and we saw the outrage right when Masson was cutting down on the staff. People love, it was Alex Chappell and Dan Kolko, and very glad we got damn that we lost Alex, and people love Alex. I thought Alex was an awesome, valuable part of Masson broadcasts, and we lost Johnny and Ray with the pregame, postgame show. I mean, and the reason why a lot of these RSNs exist. I mean, Masson is exclusively existing for baseball. Now I know that they had some ACC basketball games were put on the network, and I'm not sure how the financials behind those deals, but like a lot of these, like Marquee for the Cubs, right? Nesson, yes, all these things exist for these teams to play on. That's kind of where they started, and I know some of them added teams, but that's kind of where they exist. So yeah, the RSNs are very important, and for your RSN, I love watching. I love watching my Wizards and Caps on NBC Sports Washington. I don't want a Friday night game where the national broadcast comes in. If it's a big weekend series with the New York Mets, you know what I don't want on Friday night? I don't want some. And look, they might pick great broadcasters who you and I both like, but sometimes I want Bob and I want Kevin Franzen, or on a guest weekend Ryan Zimmerman maybe. I want those guys on a big Mets Nats game Friday night, maybe in New York City when they're not at home and I can't go to the game. I think you're spot on with that. The deal is it's taking visibility away from local markets is not, expanding vision is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could we not keep the games on the local market feeds? Could we not do that? I feel like that's one step where, look, I understand why they do it because they want the viewership from those markets because those are the markets most likely to watch the games, right? I mean, if it's a game on Apple TV, it's Nats, Nats Mets. I mean, who's going to watch? Nats fans and Mets fans, right? The two ones you want to draw, but still, those people want their broadcasters, and they might feel cheated. I mean, imagine if some of the big series the Nats had down the stretch in their, the 2019 barnstorming run were some games were taken away from them. I mean, it wouldn't feel right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm completely with you. I don't mind the occasional game that's on a national broadcast. Like growing up, I always
Right.
thought it was cool to see the
Sunday
Nationals
Night
on Sunday Night
Baseball.
Baseball,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Just every now and then, because it was a rare occurrence, and B, I like to hear the Nationals' perspective on things, national perspective.
Right.
And hear like what are the people outside the market saying? Are they, maybe I hear something that, oh, this is actually, how our farm system is viewed, and I've always kind of thought of it as this, or whatever. So I do think that there is some value, to that. But I think that the ability to make it accessible to everyone, having it on cable where everybody can watch it, or simulcasting and having the RSN broadcast themselves while it's going on in the national stage. I mean, those YouTube games as well. It was the same way. I mean, YouTube, it's
Facebook, right?
easier to
Facebook
access, or
had the
Facebook. Yeah, sorry, it was
yeah, yeah,
Facebook.
yeah.
Facebook, it's easier to access, but what if you don't have a Facebook?
I
You
think
don't want a
Facebook and
Facebook.
YouTube both did them. If I'm not,
It might have been both.
yeah,
I thought it was YouTube, but yeah,
yeah, you
now that
might
you're
be, yeah, yeah,
saying
I think so. Yeah, you're
Facebook
right.
involved
Yeah,
too.
yeah, YouTube.
So either way, I mean, those are things that you can access with any computer, but baseball is a sport that's really rooted in the older generation who might not be as accessible when it comes to computers and things like that. And a lot of people don't want a Facebook account for privacy reasons, and I completely understand that. And you can't watch your baseball game because you don't want Mark Zuckerberg looking into your computer. I think there's something wrong there. So, it's something that MLB is clearly prioritizing money over everything else. But I think that you really need to think about the fans here, and think about how you want to foster growth among the fan base. And it starts by doing things that might not make you the most money in the moment. It takes patience and willingness to invest and grow a fan base. And that's just simply something that MLB hasn't done well the past 20, 30 years.
Yeah, so I'm looking now. It was actually both Facebook and YouTube, and then now Apple TV Plus is going to
Hmm.
join the fray of that. I mentioned barnstorming, Matt. One of our sponsors is barnstorming. It is Mission Possible. Are you ready to discover your purpose and leave an impact wherever you go? Mission Possible, written and read by the New York Times bestselling author Tim Tebow, encourages you to find your inspiration, to pursue your purpose, and create a life for yourself that counts. Ignite a new spark in your life through this inspirational listen. Mission Impossible by Tim Tebow is available wherever books are sold. Also, former baseball player. Tim Tebow. So there you go. We'll tie in as well.
I have
All
his
right.
book
So,
somewhere around here.
oh, you do which one? Is it the first one? The one that was
I think
about?
his first one, his
Yeah,
journey and
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, there you go. Tim Tebow, baseball tie. All right. So you and I mentioned this to you before. I was creating my 10 biggest questions for the Nationals heading into the season, and I thought to myself as the lockout goes on, which of these questions were affected by by the lockout? Like, is this good? Is this bad? So, like, I thought pitching staff, right? We're not sure they're going to have 5 guys to go ready on opening day that we're all sure are major league starters. But then I also thought of, and so obviously lockout, more time to get guys ready, less time that they have to pitch during the entire season to make sure that they can keep a rotation together. But also guys like Cesar Hernandez and Asdrubal Cabrera, who maybe they put together good seasons and at the deadline are good pieces for you. Less time for those guys to prove themselves as potential pieces. Less time for guys like Cade Cavalli to prove himself and get to the major league roster, right? Less time to evaluate if certain guys are good to go or if other guys, once again, are trade pieces. Maybe Kyle Finnegan has a great season and wow, everybody's red hot and you get more out of Kyle Finnegan as a trade piece than you thought. Stuff like that. So where are you on this? Does the lockout, because I just saw on Twitter right now, and the reason I look at my phone is there's so many updates constantly all the time. Jesse over at Washington Post said MLB just announced in an emailed statement that opening day is now delayed to the 14th. I'm not sure, maybe off the top of your head, how many games that entails for the Nats. Is that what? I think it's another 3 series, I believe, 2 or 3 series.
I
It's
believe it would
the
be 2 series because it's a week that they're delaying it. They were supposed to have a 3-game series against the Mets and 2 games against the Phillies. Those got knocked off. Now we were going to have, I believe it was a 4-game series against the Mets. And I don't remember what that second series was.
so
But
let
likely
me
those 2 series would be knocked out.
yeah, everything now for the Nationals will be wiped out until that date. So things obviously and now this means they're gonna have to bump back obviously spring training and whatnot. This would, according to the schedule, this would push them to at Pirates. Uh,
There we go.
on at Pirates. So the games they've got left scheduled are 4 with the Mets, 3 in Atlanta. So those 7 get wiped away. But I mean, there is a conversation I think to be had here. Like, look, generally speaking, yes, no baseball is not good for anybody. We all lose. But there is a sentiment that a team that's potentially not trying to win, like less time could be good for them in some ways, but also bad for them in some ways.
Yeah, I think that the big theme for the Nationals this year is to figure out who they have. Who are the players that are in house that they're going to be able to build around in the future, and that's going to determine how quickly they're able to build a contender and whether they're going to be able to build a contender before Juan Soto hits free agency, which really is the big question for this organization. So, less time in the season certainly doesn't help any of them. Guys like Carter Kieboom, as you mentioned, Luis Garcia, the Victor Robleses, the Donovan Casey's,
Lane
the
Thomas.
Riley Adams, Lane Thomas, Kybert
There's
Ruiz.
just so many guys we mentioned out loud too. It's
Yeah,
like, oh, the entire team has to figure out who's going to be Nationals next year.
seriously. I mean, you go down we haven't even talked about the pitchers. I mean, Josiah
Right.
Gray, Mason Thompson's going to be involved. Gabe Klobasitz was a guy they liked last year. Patrick Murphy came in as a flamethrower for him. He's a guy who could be a late inning weapon if he develops the right way. Tanner Rainey needs a big year to show he's still
Mm-hmm.
got something left in the tank. I mean, these are guys that need big sample sizes to instill confidence in the Nationals that they're players they can depend on. Or for the Nationals to see that they really aren't that guy and we got to try someone else. And you really need to give those guys 2-3 months to show what they got before you can really make any kind of judgments on them. So, it's definitely going to put the Nationals in a difficult position, no matter how many games are missed. But it's just kind of the reality that everyone's facing. All 30 teams have got to deal with it. So we'll see kind of what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're in a spot where it's like these questions can't be answered, right? So the Lane Thomas, like Lane Thomas, Riley Adams, like they don't need a full 162 to evaluate that, right?
They're not going
Because
to get a full 162.
right, well, yeah, they're not going to get it anyway. But like it's gonna be one season regardless, right? And there are questions always about, hey, is one season enough to evaluate a guy? But like Josiah Gray had, you and I had talked about this too. He mentioned about upping his inning count, right? So, the idea of, all right, what does that look like? Like the number that he's going to hit, and that the Nationals say, hey, we can rely on you for, that changes now. That's just naturally going to change.
200 is probably not attainable
Out
at
it's
this point.
and he'd mentioned that, I think that number, like that out loud. I think
Hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
So that's out of the question. But on the positive, it gives guys like Strasburg and Joe Ross a bit more time. I want to go there too, because that's something actually I've not touched on a lot, because I don't know. I think a lot of us don't know. But like, what do you think is the latest on Strasburg? What have you been hearing? It sounds like it's not much, but I mean, we have to ask the question, right?
Right. Yeah. No. And it's very good questions and questions that need to be answered. And I actually wrote on that recently on how that was a huge thing that we've really missed out on, the media and fans in general, is injury updates on players, because teams are not allowed to correspond with players directly. Now there is a loophole. The Athletic reported that the team's training staff is allowed to correspond with personal trainers of players. So the Nationals likely know where Strasburg and Joe Ross are in their rehab, but we haven't had any kind of availabilities. I mean, usually how we talk to Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez throughout the offseason is through press conferences, right? They sign a player, they
Mm-hmm.
trade for a guy, and they host a press conference. And we obviously ask questions about the player they just got, but we'll ask other questions and get updates on players throughout the offseason. We have literally no updates on either Ross, Strasburg, Will Harris, any injured player. And that goes for most of the league, unless the media has been able to get into contact with players directly through their agents or whoever. And a lot of players have been pretty tight-lipped because of the lockout this offseason, so they're not really willing to talk at all. So, I want to put a PSA out there to fantasy baseball players. If you're thinking about holding your draft now, wait to have your fantasy draft, because you don't know the status of a lot of players who are dealing with offseason injuries, and some might not be as far along as they were originally projected to be 4 or 5 months ago. And you're going to want to know before you make those draft picks. So that's my 2 cents as a commissioner in 2 different leagues. I'm holding off in both.
Commissioner Matt Weyrich telling you guys to hold off on your fantasy drafts. I mean, yeah, the only guys that I've seen speaking really have been minor leaguers, right? Those guys have been talking some, and look, even from some stuff that I've heard, especially those minor league guys who might get or are going to get invites to major league camp. Like those guys haven't done anything yet, right? Those are the guys who are most likely to be in AAA and AA and whatever, but are but have to wait, which is such a difficult spot to be in, because you're like, man, does this hurt me? I'm not getting reps. I'm not like, you're getting reps in your own, sure,
They do have
whatever.
minor league. A lot of teams have minor league camps open right now, so
Exactly.
that is
But I
good.
believe
And
the guys who are, at least I heard this recently from at least one player, but like the guys
on the 40-man.
who were, yeah, exactly. 40 man who are, minor leaguers, tweeners, I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm.
right? The big tweener guys. I mean, they don't really know what their status is. And the
Yeah,
guys who are below them are working their way up, working their way right now. You know what I mean? They're getting ready and, could supplant some of these guys.
we did get to talk to Nationals director of player development, Dejan Watson, about 2 weeks ago, and I actually asked him about those players specifically.
Hmm.
Are you worried about them and the shape that they're going to be coming into camp, and whether or not they're going to be behind, because they're guys who would be getting reps right now and they're not. And he said that we gave them advice on schedules before the lockout. And also, these are guys who have been in the professional baseball ranks for a few years now. They know how to get their bodies ready. So we're not
Right.
necessarily as worried about those guys as we would be, 18, 19-year-olds who are really just getting started in their professional careers. These are guys who've been around the block a little bit. So he said they have all the confidence that when they do report and this lockout ends, that they're going to be in shape and ready to go. But,
See,
that's kind of
they can say, right. They can say that, but we all remember 2020, right? When things were thrown in for a loop and we saw so many guys.
Yeah. But that's why
so many
MLB
injuries.
is saying they have to have a 4-week spring training this year because of all those injuries.
Exactly.
And that was a shortened season. Guys didn't even have to go 162 games.
But they're scheduled, especially those pitchers, right? The pitchers are where we saw the injuries. And so I've made this point recently that we have not seen a standard, like there has not been a standard seasons since 2018, 2019, right? That was 162, 162. 19 to 20 was long to short. Then it was short to normal. Now you go back to this year. Now it's going to be normal back to short. Then we think so. Then next year is going to be shortened back to normal. So the variance there cannot be good, especially for the pitchers, in my opinion. Now they can say, yeah, and look, these guys, it's not like they're not on their own, but like there is so much to be said for being at the site with your teammates, with the staff against actual teams, ramping up 1 inning, 2 innings, 3 innings in a spring training game,
facing live hitters.
Facing live hitters. And so look, yes, I'm sure those training staffs are doing everything they can to get those guys ready on short notice. And I'm sure out of everybody in this situation, those guys are the people who work for the team in those capacities are some of the most stressed, because they're going to be the ones who are right now trying to figure out what their timeline is. And when it happens, under the gun to get these guys ready to go. But they can say it. It's just hard to believe. And I feel bad for them too.
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot they can even talk about because they're not allowed to comment on these players anyway. So
right, exactly.
Everybody is just kind of in the dark. Really, we're just hearing
big limbo.
A lot of the questions that we have to ask are like hypotheticals. Just like skirting around actually asking about specific players. Just saying, generally speaking, a player like
how are the right-handers doing? How are the lefties doing?
Exactly. So it's a bit of a dance for everybody, and I'll be thankful when it's all over.
All right, a couple more words from our sponsors here. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Guys, go to Built.com today. That is Built.com. Find the variety of Built Bars. Eat your sadness away and don't feel bad about it right now with mint brownie, coconut almond, and white chocolate cookies and cream. Built Bars right now. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, 17 grams of protein. You guys go to Built.com. It's Built.com today. Promo code LOCK15, LOCKED 15 LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com today. Also, today's show is brought to you by rockauto.com. You guys go to rockauto.com today. You'll find a variety of parts for your car or truck, any make and model they've got there. Do not choose to spend 30, 50, 100% more at a chain store or a car dealership. Rockauto.com. You got you covered. They got the great jingle as well. Honda Odyssey fuel pump at a chain store, $353, rockauto.com, $216. So go to rockauto.com today, write Locked On in their How'd You Hear About Us box. That way they know we sent you. Amazing selection, always low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. All right, Matt, so before I get you out of here, how do you feel about the reporting state of MLB, because it feels like we don't know what to trust as fans. It's not the same for other sports, man. We got Mortensen. We got a bunch of guys we trust in NFL. We got Shams and Woj in the NBA. Who to trust? Who knows what's happening? Right? It's the hard part of MLB fans. Paston says one thing, Nightingale says another, and Evan Drellich says another. And I respect all three of those guys, but it feels like they're all reporting on different parts of the process simultaneously. Do you feel that, or do you see us differently?
Yeah, there's definitely different angles that are coming out. Jesse Rogers over at ESPN has been all
Mm-hmm.
over the lockout as well. Bob Nightingale of USA Today had his
Who's
moment
redeemed
for
himself?
fun.
Very
Yeah.
much redeemed himself during the lockout.
So, there's definitely I wouldn't say different information, but we're definitely getting multiple sides from different reporters. And I think that's the big thing that you have to take in context here and kind of realize as you follow along with certain reporters and see who really, what side are they kind of leaning toward? What side can you tell they're getting a lot of their sourcing from? If you're hearing, a lot of pro player things, they're probably sourcing a lot of their stuff from the union side. If you're hearing a lot of pro owner things, or anybody from MLB.com's reporting, they're coming from the league side. So you kind of have to, unfortunately, sift through it, and see, read it for yourself and kind of come to your own conclusions based on the facts. That's my big thing. It's just look for the facts, man. Don't try to, jump on top of somebody else's opinion and piggyback off of that because a lot of them are working off of information that are only maybe coming from one side, and you might not be getting the whole picture. So you got to read multiple reports and come to your own conclusions based off that. That's the most responsible way to deal with journalism in this day and age when information is so readily accessible and so easy to disperse, I might add. That a lot of people have platforms that maybe shouldn't. So you really have to trust the sources, uh, trust the reporters that you have read through and have come to understand that they do responsible reporting. Trust them, but also don't be afraid to ask questions. Interact with these guys. And try to find answers for yourselves because, like you
Except
said,
for
there's
Jeff
there's a lot
Passan,
to
or he
sort
might
through.
say something mean about your mom. That's I know I've noticed that's a Jeff favorite. He says,
He will
so don't be
roast
rude to
you.
Jeff. Don't be rude to Jeff. Just be fair.
The passing clapbacks are unmatched, I have to say.
I do enjoy. I come guys I do enjoy. It. I find them. I'm not sure about your opinion. I find them wildly unprofessional. I find them absolutely hilarious as well, which I think is okay for somebody of his stature. It's like, look, I'm under contract at ESPN. They'll still have me on TV. I
Yeah.
can say about Jeff 4859's mom whatever I want to, and I find all those things pretty funny. It entertains me.
He gets the Twitter
He
like
understands. Yeah.
vibe, he fits in well with the Twitter peeps. But yeah, it definitely can there's a line and he skirts around it for sure.
Habitual line stepper is the way to
Yes.
put it. All right, Matt. So what are you working on right now? And also, don't just keep this national centric, right? This is Nationals podcast. But a lot of these folks love their Commanders fans for years and years. Are you writing any Porzingis stuff? Any Commanders stuff? Any DC United stuff? Any whatever you're writing? Tell us, what do you got going on?
That's right. Well, yeah, I'm over at NBC Sports Washington. You can follow my work at NBCSportsWashington.com or on Twitter at by Matt Weyrich. For those of you watching, it's right there below. I'm working on a lot of things right now. We're kind of with baseball not producing a ton of storylines. The lockout stuff can get repetitive, so I've definitely been dipping into other sports. We have the Carson Wentz trade today, which put out a breakdown of the trade there and the draft picks that Washington will have
How much
in the
money are we
upcoming
taking on
draft.
here? How much
Uh,
how much are they paying? A
so
lot.
this next season it's going to be 15 million guaranteed, but a 28.3 million dollar cap hit,
Ooh.
which they only had 33 million coming in this offseason. So I think that means writing is on the wall for Landon Collins. I would imagine that he's a guy.
No, I like Landon Collins.
I know he was that Buffalo nickel this year too, and
I
actually it worked out for him
love
pretty
that
well.
position.
But he's being paid way too much for the value that he
Fair enough.
brings. So I would not be surprised, especially with all the needs that they have. They're going to have to replace Brandon Sheriff on that offensive line. They really don't have a middle linebacker, which has been a position of need the last couple of years.
Mhm.
And that secondary was pretty porous last year as well. So I would imagine that they try to find a true safety to pair with Cam Curl. So there's a lot of things going on with Washington football / Commanders. Caps They're heating up right now.
Yeah.
Been writing a lot on their goalie
They just
situation.
no, yeah, they just don't have a goaltender, I guess, right? Every game is
Well,
like 5-4.
Vitek Vanacek is starting to earn the respect of the coaching staff. Now, he did not play super well yesterday.
Maybe
I'm
not.
pretty sure it's going to be Ilya Samsonov in there tonight because it's a back-to-back. But I imagine that Vitek has a grapple on that number one spot, and if he can hold on to it, the Caps are pretty tight up against that salary cap as well. So I don't think they're really going to be able to make a big splash for a goalie at the trade deadline. So if Vitek as shows any kind of consistency, the Caps are probably going to run with it and then address the position this offseason. And then, of course, you mentioned Porzingis, the Wizards. Not a team that's super fun to watch at this moment, but I got to say, Porzingis just clearly, with Beal out for the rest of the season, he looked head and shoulders like the best player on the court in limited minutes too in his debut the other day.
The
It was
key
against
words being on the court for Mr.
yes,
Kristaps, correct?
yes. We need to keep him healthy. He had this bone bruise in his knee that when they acquired him didn't seem like as big of an issue as it was, and it required him to take some more time to get healthy. But he looked great out there. I'm excited to see the impact he can make. And if Beal re-signs this offseason, that point guard position is going to be a key one for the Wizards to hone in on. So there's your little DC Sports roundup.
Love all of it. Matthew, we appreciate you for all the time you give us. Always love talking to you, and thanks for just stopping by. I'm sure once we have some word on this, which hopefully, knock on wood, is soon, I will have you back on. But thank you for your time, man.
No problem, man. Take care.